me. Y'all, they tried to kill me, so anything happened to me, y'all know they tried to kill me today. Them niggas, and then when I got in the car, I started talking shit about whole 2 eyes. Two eyes. I take my phone and run out. They chased me out the house. Hold on. Pants hanging and everything. Hold on. Screaming Hallville. I said, fuck Hallville. I don't give a fuck. You niggas better give me some money. I'm fucking telling everybody. You niggas got some money? We Hallville. Ain't nobody. Fuck Hallville. Hallville gonna have to pay. Because if not, it's a story to be told. Oh, y'all don't want to pay?
Jane Waughfield looked straight into a camera and warned thousands of people exactly what to do if anything happened to her. If anything happens to me, y'all already know who to look at. At the time, it sounded like another heated Facebook Live. Less than 24 hours later, she was shot while driving through Indianapolis. Her car crossed into oncoming traffic. She never made it out of the hospital. The day before, Jane had publicly accused a man she knew of something she claimed she'd witnessed, named him on camera, and demanded $5,000 within an hour, or she would tell the whole city what she'd seen. Then, she was dead. Years have passed. No one has ever been charged. So, was Jane's final live stream a chilling warning of what was about to happen? Or did it send investigators and the public down the wrong path from the very beginning? Tonight, we're reconstructing Jane's final 17 minutes, the hours that followed, and the unanswered questions that continue to surround a case that remains unsolved. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome. Drop a comment and let us know what city, state, or country you're tuning in from, because this channel pulls in true crime viewers from everywhere. And if documentaries like this are your thing, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because this case only gets more complicated from here. In Indianapolis, people didn't just know Jane Waughfield. They knew of her. Everybody called her Jane the Mayor, and the name fit because Jane ran her mouth the way other people run a business, loud, constant, and never behind closed doors. She owned her own tire shop on the city's east side, and if you followed her page, you already knew one thing about her. She didn't keep anything to herself. If something happened to Jane, her first move wasn't calling a friend. It was going live. That habit showed up again just one day before everything changed. On the morning of February 17th, Jane picked up a phone that belonged to one of her workers and noticed a saved contact on the call log. Boss Lady. Most people would have kept that to themselves or asked about it privately. Jane posted about it instead. It was a small moment, barely worth mentioning on its own, except it was exactly the kind of thing Jane always did. When she saw something, the internet found out about it too. That night, that same instinct turned into something far more serious. The next night, Jane went live for 17 minutes, and whatever she was about to say, she wanted the whole internet watching when she said it. She told her followers she'd been doing business with a man she'd known and been involved with a couple of years earlier.
We were doing some business, me and this dude. Now, I'm gonna tell you, he did give me some head way back a long time ago. Long time ago. Couple of years ago.
According to Jane, he'd told her to come by his uncle's house to pick something up. She said she got what she came for and left, but realized on the way out that she'd left her phone behind. So she turned around and went back for it. That's where her story took a turn. Jane said the door, which had been locked when she left minutes earlier, was now standing open. She said she walked in to grab her phone and found him there with another man, and that the two of them chased her out of the house before she could fully process what she'd just seen. Whatever actually happened inside that house, only the people who were there know for certain.
Hey, boom, boom, boom. So I'm knocking on this motherfucking door. I'm like, I need my fucking phone. That's my money bag. I'm like, hitting this motherfucking door, and I'm like, won't nobody come to the fucking door, right? I'm like, damn. Something told me to check the door. That motherfucker was unlocked. When I stepped in there, y'all. Oh my God, my stomach hurts. My stomach hurts. When I walked in there, y'all, what I seen with my own 2 eyes. Hold on. Thank God my phone was sitting on the table right there by the door. I swung that door open and I said, oh! And I couldn't even talk the words. I couldn't get the words out of my mouth, right? So I'm like, trying to breathe. I'm like, and I just looked down and see my phone. I snatched my phone. They was standing there just staring at me. So them motherfuckers looking like the devil. They was looking like they was trying to kill me. So I just grabbed my phone off my, I was like, so I jump in, start running. I done jump back in my car. Remember I told you I parked up by the door, right? So I get in my fucking car.
What's not in dispute is what Jane did next. Still visibly shaken on camera, she named him, a man she called Jamel Carter, someone she said went by Garg, and posted his photo for everyone watching. Then she gave him an ultimatum, $5,000 within the hour, or she'd tell the entire city his business. He didn't pay, and Jane didn't stop talking. For the rest of that live stream, she laid out what she said were warning signs she'd missed earlier. Small details from before that day that she said, looking back, should have told her something. She kept circling back to the money, too, telling her followers a truck like his shouldn't come with an excuse like his. Then, near the end of the video, her tone shifted from anger into something closer to fear. She told everyone watching that she meant every word of her threats, and that if anything ever happened to her, they'd already know exactly who to look at. Nobody watching that night could have known how little time she actually had left. Less than 24 hours after that live stream ended, Jane Waughfield was dead. On the morning of February 18th, 2020, IMPD officers were already working in the area near West 30th Street and Lafayette Road when they heard gunfire, followed almost immediately by the sound of a crash 2 blocks away. What they found when they arrived was chaos. A yellow Camaro that had been flying down the road at close to 100 miles an hour, slamming into a car stopped at a red light hard enough to spin it 3 times before plowing into a second vehicle. 4 cars total were tangled up in the wreck. Inside the Camaro was Jane. A driver from one of the other vehicles walked over to check on her and found her unresponsive behind the wheel. She was rushed to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Police confirmed what the gunfire suggested. Jane had been shot before she ever lost control of that car. What they never confirmed, then or since, is which one actually killed her, the gunshot or the crash that followed it. More than 6 years later, that detail has still never been made public. Word travels fast in a city, and this one traveled faster than most. According to people who were already talking about it online, the yellow Camaro was recognized almost immediately, and so was the video Jane had posted less than a day earlier. Investigators were publicly asked whether social media had played a role in her death. They never gave an answer they were willing to share. The reaction online split almost instantly into 2 camps. Some people focus purely on the timing. A woman exposes a man one night and is gone by the next morning, a coincidence almost too tight to be a coincidence. Others were far less gentle about it, arguing that anyone who threatens to expose somebody and turns up shot the next day probably already knew exactly why. Underneath both reactions sat the same uncomfortable question. Had Jane's final broadcast been a warning she never should have needed to give, or the very thing that got her killed? The man most people online decided was responsible was the same one Jane had already put on blast. Jamel Carter Sr., a man some called Garg, also out of Indianapolis. By all accounts, he wasn't a stranger to hard work. He ran his own trucking company, Carter Express Unlimited, alongside a family cleaning business he'd built with relatives. According to posts that circulated after Jane's video went up, he'd also served time in federal prison earlier in his life and had written at one point about the friendships he'd made while incarcerated, saying he never regretted that chapter because of the people it brought into his life. After Jane's death, people combing through his page found an older post from February 13th, 5 days before she died, vaguely referencing giving something up at midnight or the next night. Thin on its own, but enough to feed speculation once people went looking for anything that seemed to fit. It didn't help that Jane herself had commented on one of his posts just days earlier, asking him to give her a call. Whatever business the two of them had, this clearly wasn't the first time their paths had crossed. What happened next says as much about the internet as it does about this case. Police hadn't even finished their initial investigation before people found Jamel's page and started calling him a killer in the comments, some of it in the same ugly language Jane herself had used about him. He was never arrested. He was never charged. He was never even named by police as a suspect. not in this case, not in any other. But online, in the days after Jane's death, the verdict had already been decided by people who'd never spoken to either one of them. With no arrest and no official motive, people who'd been following the case online started asking the obvious question. If this many people already had a theory, why hadn't anyone been charged? Around that time, a content creator who'd been covering the case, going by Nikki at Night, started getting private messages from people claiming to know both Jane and Jamal personally. One of them said she'd gone to high school with Jamal and that Jane's best friend was close with her own. According to this person, the entire story Jane had told on camera wasn't just exaggerated, it was a lie, start to finish. Though she wasn't willing to say more than that without talking privately first. A second message went even further, laying out an entirely different version of events. According to this account, Jane hadn't actually been involved with Jamal at all. The real relationship, and the real falling out, was with his cousin over money the two of them had been doing business together on. When that business went sideways and the payment never came, this version claims, Jane didn't go public with a debt dispute. She went public with an accusation that the men involved were secretly gay instead, and it was never true. Neither of these claims came with a name attached. Neither one has ever been confirmed by police, by Jane's family, or by anyone connected to Jamal. They're exactly what they sound like. Two anonymous people, reaching out privately to someone covering the case, each offering a version of events that completely upends the story Jane told the world in her own words. That doesn't make either of them true. It doesn't make either of them false either. It just means that by the time investigators were looking into who might have wanted Jane silenced, the honest answer was that the list had gotten a lot longer than one name. In the days that followed, more of Jane's history started surfacing, and it painted a picture of someone who'd done this kind of thing before, more than once. In one earlier video, she'd gone after a man she called Mario, accusing him of shooting at her rental car and spending several minutes tearing into him personally, his finances, his relationships, a business partnership she said she'd once tried to bring him into before cutting him off entirely. In another, she targeted a man she called Joe, tying him to an attempted break-in at her tire shop and accusing him outright, on camera, of being behind it. Neither of those accusations against Mario or Joe were ever confirmed either, but taken together with everything else, they showed a pattern. This wasn't the first time Jane had used a public platform to accuse someone by name, demand accountability, and let her followers decide what to do with that information. One more account surfaced after her death that's worth including, because it echoes the cousin theory almost exactly, from a completely different source. A man who said he'd known Jane for years, but had cut ties with her back in 2013, posted that the real story wasn't about catching anyone with another man at all. It was about a tax scheme gone wrong. According to him, Jane had let Jamal's cousin claim her children as dependents on his taxes, expecting a cut of the refund once it came through. When the money didn't show up the way she expected, an argument followed, and the cousin refused to pay her anything. Jamal, this account claims, offered to cover what she was owed himself, but only once that refund actually came in, and as of this person's post, it still hadn't arrived for anyone. According to him, Jane didn't wait. She went public with an entirely different story instead, one that had nothing to do with money. He also described Jane as someone capable of pushing people to genuinely frightening extremes when she felt wronged. None of this is confirmed, but it means that by the time anyone was seriously looking into who might have wanted Jane silenced, Jamel Carter wasn't the only name on that list. She'd been picking public fights for months, and any one of them, in theory, could have had a reason to want her quiet. With his name already spreading across every corner of the internet, Jamel posted his own response. The tone was bitter, more than defensive. He said he was finding out who was really in his corner now that people were repeating what they'd heard. He specifically pushed back on the cousin's story, saying, with real sarcasm, that he was almost grateful for it. Now he knew exactly who around him was willing to believe the worst without asking him directly. He denied knowing Jane at all, said he'd never dealt with her, period. He also picked apart one specific detail in her account, something about the timing that he said simply didn't add up given what day it actually was. And he made clear he resented having his name connected to her death without ever being asked a single question about it. He didn't owe anyone an explanation, he wrote, and if anyone had something to say to him directly, they knew where to find him. Not long after, he took the post down. Here's the problem with taking that denial at face value. It doesn't line up with what we already know. Jamal said, in writing, that he never dealt with Jane and didn't know her. But Jane had commented on one of his posts, just days before her death, asking him to call her. A detail that only makes sense between two people who already had some kind of relationship. Maybe that comment was one-sided, ignored, meaningless. Or maybe, "I don't know her," wasn't entirely true. Both of those things can't be right at the same time. And nobody, not police, not either one of them, ever resolved which one was. On February 19th, family and friends gathered at Municipal Gardens for a vigil. Jane's daughters, Beyonce and Jayla, were too overwhelmed to speak to reporters that night. Their cousin, China Chestnut, stood between them and spoke for the family instead, telling everyone gathered how much she was already missed, how wrong it felt that she'd had to go this way. Friends said Jane had already been planning her next birthday. She would have turned 41 the following month. Then, for more than 2 years, nothing happened. No charges, no arrest, no official confirmation of a motive from police or anyone else. Just two competing versions of what happened in that house, Jane's and everyone else's, with no one in a position to say for certain which one was true. The case didn't close, it just went quiet. Then, in October of 2022, Jamel Carter Sr. was shot in the Hawville neighborhood on the city's west side, the same man Jane had named in her final video 2.5 years earlier. Police were initially told he was in critical condition. Within minutes of arriving, they confirmed he'd died at the scene. No suspect was ever arrested. Police said there was no ongoing threat to the surrounding area. And just like Jane's case, this one was never solved either. Online, the reaction split again, the same way it had 2 years earlier. Some people called it karma, insisting that whoever came for Jamal did it because of what he'd allegedly done to Jane. Others pointed out the obvious problem with that theory. Nobody had ever proven Jamal did anything to Jane in the first place, which means calling his death payback assumes the very thing this entire case never actually confirmed. Two people, two unsolved shootings, 2.5 years apart. And still, 6 years later, not a single official answer connecting them, or ruling out that they were ever connected at all. There's no version of this story where Jane Waughfield is simply a villain, and no version where she's simply an innocent victim either. Both things can be uncomfortably true at once. She may have witnessed something that terrified her badly enough to go public with it that same night. She also turned that moment into a demand for $5,000 within the hour, threatening to expose a man's private life to an entire city if he didn't pay. Whether her story was completely true, partly true, or built on a falling out over money that had nothing to do with anyone's sexuality, Jane went looking for a payout either way. That doesn't make what happened to her acceptable. It also doesn't make her simply a victim who did nothing to put herself in harm's way. Both of those things sit together in this case, whether that's comfortable or not. And that's really the heart of what makes this case so hard to close. With the sheer number of people Jane had publicly named, accused, or gone after online in the months before her death, narrowing down who actually wanted her silenced was never going to be simple. Was Jamel Carter responsible for what happened to her? Nobody has ever proven that he was. Was his own death, 2.5 years later, connected to hers at all? Or was it something else entirely? Maybe even tied to one of the other people Jane had crossed. That question has never been answered either, and at this point, it may never be. What we're left with is two unsolved deaths, a viral video that predicted its own outcome with a precision that still unsettles people who watch it today, and a small city where, 6 years later, almost everyone still has a theory, and not one of them has ever been proven. If this case has you thinking, let us know in the comments what you believe really happened. And if you want to be here for the next one, go ahead and subscribe. This is exactly the kind of case this channel exists to dig into, one verified fact at a time.